Hello, true believers. This is James, and I'm here with Reggie. We're talking today about Superman. Big movie coming up. Batman vs. Superman. Today it's Team Superman. So if you want to check out about our Batman podcast, check out reggiestake.com.
Oh, yeah.
And we're doing basically a crossover like they do in the comics. Like, if you want to collect all of mine, if you want to collect all of my podcasts, well, in order to see what's going on in the next issue, you're going to have to collect Reggie's as well. So,
who got the better character?
Oh, you did.
Oh, okay.
Like, I'm not going to... Look, I love Superman, but to be honest, I really... I love Superman, and he's an American icon, or American pop culture icon, but
I'll have to
Batman's really better.
I'll have to let you go through some of my Batman comics and then figure out something that you want to do on a future podcast. Or
Definitely. Now, the thing, Superman, he's really like... Both these characters really are, but we were talking about it a little bit. I think they're both kind of American mythology.
Yeah.
Like, we had folk tales in the 80s, like Pecos Bill and stuff that no one remembers. But, like, this is the stuff that... And, this was all... Batman and Superman weren't totally original when they came up with them. They were taken from earlier stories. And, Batman, of course, is... very much just Zorro in America, pretty much. Like,
right.
I mean, it's the same idea.
Batman's kind of like every man's hero in a certain sense because he's not an alien. He's not doesn't have superpowers in the sense of he wasn't infected by anything, bitten by anybody, or drank something. It's just a guy who wants to fight injustice and he's got the money to do so in a way that he doesn't have to reveal who he really is.
And, Superman, of course, borrows a lot from the John Carter stories, which there was a movie on John Carter a few years ago, which wasn't as bad as... It wasn't terrible, but it wasn't great. But
my wife has seen that movie. I got the impression she enjoys it, but
it's actually not. It's actually kind of good. I've read the books though. Here's the deal: the books were stupid, and so's the movie. I mean, the books were really stupid, but I actually think it's worth watching. Like, I mean, it was a box office bomb, so they'll never make a sequel to it, but I don't think it was a bad movie by any means.
You were talking about Batman and Superman both being kind of American icons, or that sort of thing. Superman is technically older.
Yeah, by about a year. 1939.
July 1938, and
Batman is 39.
May of 1939.
Yeah. The thing is, they both kind of represent. Since they're, I stand by it that they're both American myths. They both kind of represent, in a way, the American spirit. Batman, of course, represents the idea of... Batman represents the idea of kind of... what am I trying to say here? Like, diligence against adversity. Like, I mean, yes, he's super rich, but he also lost his parents, and he's spent his whole life, instead of just being a rich guy, using that diligence to become something more. Whereas Superman is, he's an immigrant, just like all of us,
right? Just
like all of our ancestors were in America. He was an immigrant. He was an immigrant at a time when a lot of immigrants were still coming in, and of course there's still a lot of immigrants coming in, but
he's also kind of looked at as sort of in the comics, at least I've always thought, kind of like a big Boy Scout.
He is.
Kind of like Captain America is in the Marvel universe.
Absolutely. Well, Captain America is more troubled than Superman. Captain America, before I actually read Captain America, like, I kind of thought he's similar to Superman in that, yes, he's kind of got that Boy Scout attitude, but when you really read the comics, Captain America is very troubled. He struggles with maintaining the American ideal, with maintaining the American dream. That is a struggle for him. That goes back to the 60s. When he was brought back with Stan Lee, it's actually like that. That is one thing about Marvel, is they were the first to kind of branch away from just like, they were really giving their characters flaws that comic books weren't giving at the time. And Captain America's big flaw is also his strength, is that sticking to his ideals is a struggle. It's a constant struggle.
Gets him in trouble.
Well, and he's left the Avengers. In the 60s, he'd leave the Avengers all the time, and he'd get depressed all the time because he, even in the 70s, with the Nixon stuff going on in real life, that more or less crossed over into the comic book world, where Captain America decided he'd had enough of the red, white, and blue, realized it was a facade, and quit the Avengers, quit S.H.I.E.L.D., and called himself Nomad, and got a different costume. Of course, he couldn't just dress up as a regular guy. He had to get another costume, but like no stars and stripes on it. That was his big protest. So. I mean, he is a Boy Scout, but he's also an idealist, and he also struggles with his idealism. Superman does to an extent in later issues, not quite as much as Captain America does. I mean, Superman definitely tries to stick to those ideals, but it works for Superman because he is the ultimate immigrant. He's an alien,
right?
So for him, it really kind of works better, because if he ever got away from those ideals, he could put people at risk, people's lives at risk. Mm-hmm. So I mean, it's definitely a different way of looking at it. On this show, we're gonna focus a little bit on Superman and in other media, like the TV shows, the movies, the old Fleischer cartoons. We're also going to focus on one of his most famous storylines, the death of Superman from 1992. Did you ever read that or anything?
No, I did not. I already knew about it more or less because of the attention it got in the news. You're killing off, quote, a man who couldn't be killed, supposedly. So. The death of Superman was a very it was a media frenzy, essentially. And I kind of, this was not the first time a superhero had been killed off, or this goes back to in my opinion, the beginning of the Bronze Age, the definitive Bronze Age comic, Spider-Man issue 121, where Gwen Stacy is killed off by the Green Goblin. And then then a few years later, you had Jean Grey died in X-Men. So of course, she was brought back to life later in the 80s, but there was a few years in between. So you had big deaths in comics. The difference, though, is, first off, Superman was Superman's death in the comics needed?
Well, and that's...
I mean, as far as...
We're gonna... Yeah.
I mean, was it needed in the sense to help revitalize Superman in the comics, or was it just because someone came up with this idea of like, hey, let's do this, see what kind of reaction we get, and go from there? That's actually a really good question. When Jean Grey was killed off in X-Men, that was a very organic story. Because I would imagine Superman's got to be harder to write for than what Batman has ever been.
Yeah, and Superman, I don't think that his death was organic. I think that there were a lot of reasons why they killed him off. I think first off, they killed him off knowing good and well they were going to bring him right back to life.
Right.
So there is a level of cynicism with this story. When he going back a little further, Crisis on Infinite Earth was in 1985, I believe.
Okay.
That is, have you ever heard of that?
No.
Okay, what that is that was basically the first time DC or anybody really tried to reboot themselves. And what they did was they basically, through that storyline, all the Earths, Earth 1, Earth 2, blah, blah, all turned into one Earth. And it kind of, the storyline was able to start over again due to time travel or something. It doesn't actually make any sense, but basically the multiverse was condensed down into one universe. And actually, speaking of characters who died, the Flash, Barry Allen, died at the end of that. Supergirl died at the end of that. They were not brought back, not until New 52.
Really?
The Flash that you saw in the 90s was actually Kid Flash, Wally West.
So the Barry Allen Flash went for years with no comics in.
He did. We need to do a story on the Flash because he is actually crucial. Every time DC reboots itself, the Flash is always at the center of it.
For
I don't really know why. Well, like even in the 50s, when it goes back, the tradition goes back to even in the 50s when they made their new Flash, and one of the stories in that was he runs so fast that he goes into another universe where he meets the Flash from the 40s. And they established that as the Flash from the 40s lives in Earth 2. And that's the first time Earth 1 and Earth 2
I think the TV series Flash has dealt with some of that.
Yeah. And that's the first time they ever established that there was an Earth 1 or Earth 2. Gradually, over the 60s,
more and more.
Yeah, they worked that in with Superman and Batman. There's no definite issue for Superman or Batman where they officially say, okay, now it's Earth 1. Mm-hmm. You just have to kind of guess. Like, there's no definite issue. But for the most part, it's like, once Batman starts getting cool and dark again, you can say, okay, I guess this is Earth 1. But Superman is a little harder. But
now, I noticed here in your notes, after they killed off Superman, DC suspended his comics for 3 months?
For 3 months, yeah.
Was that kind of... Did they let people know, or they just...
I believe they did. I know when they... I believe they did at the... I'm sure that was at the end of the comics. They always... I know with Marvel, they always tell you what's going on. And I know when Spider-Man, when they, quote, ended Spider-Man, had the finale in 1999, they were all like, we're gonna take a month off, and then we're gonna reboot it from like issue 1, and then that they're taking time off, and then once that hiatus is over, then you read issue 1, and all it is a continuation of Spider-Man. It's like, what is this? Like, so like they're always. The 90s were really bad about doing gimmicks and stuff like that.
Now, I'm assuming trying to find a first run copy of that particular issue of Superman, it would be hard to find.
Not as bad as you'd think.
Or because so many people bought them up.
Yeah. The funny part about this storyline, there's about 20 issues, I think, that are like... If you count Death of Superman and then you count the other acts, like Act 1 is Doomsday, Act 2 is Funeral for a Friend, which I have a couple of those issues. First copy, I actually did one of them for an earlier podcast. And then Act 3 is Reign of the Supermen. When you count all of those acts together, that's about 20 issues of comics. The thing about Death of Superman is... sold so many copies. All these comics sold so many copies that their resale value is basically worthless. Now, that doesn't stop local comic book shops from charging $15 for one, but that's just they're over, and I've seen it. They're overpricing that. It shouldn't cost them like you can find those just about anywhere.
No, I know at one time I tried to find some first run issues of the Nightfall series for Batman.
That's a little harder.
And some of those that I found, even if I did find them, were so priced out of my pocketbook. It's
Yeah.
like, oh, no, thank you.
Nightfall is basically the companion piece to Death of Superman in a way. Nightfall was not. I know that this might be hard for some viewers, for some listeners to understand, but there was a time when Superman was way more popular than Batman.
Oh, yeah.
And that time was about 50 years in a row. Batman's Nightfall, I don't think had any. I would be shocked if that had any mainstream media coverage. Like,
No.
there's no reason for it. It's like, oh, Batman broke his back. Like
deal.
that's not going to hit the news.
It's just
But-
that comic, though, that whole series, though, was just so, it was such a
Nightfall is so
good.
good.
Yes.
like that is so good.
to me, that could be a series easily, or it could even be its own trilogy.
Yeah.
In a movie.
Yeah,
I
it
mean,
could.
it's that good.
Yeah, it's very good. But yeah, so finding like actual original prints of Nightfall, you can find them. Like, they're not rare or anything, but they're going to be expensive. Mm-hmm. Like, they're going to be very expensive, especially the big one, the one where Bane is breaking his back on the
Right.
cover, and that weird dinosaur is in the back.
Yeah, I just figure, the issue with, the death of Superman would also be hard to find. You would think.
It's really not that bad. Like, I know I talked to some of the locals, and they act like it's hard to come in. I've seen it at comic book stores a couple times. It's really not that hard to find.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of since it had so much news coverage, a lot of non-readers
Also-
bought it, like thinking it's going to be worth millions someday.
But because it's so, yeah.
like, I mean, like I said, if you go to a comic book shop, you're probably going to spend $15 on it, and I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that these movies are so popular right now. If it weren't for the movies, those things would be like $5 probably. Like, they're really not worth very much. They shouldn't be worth what they are. Like, they're jacking them up, but whatever. I better be careful. I shop at a lot of these comic book shops. I don't want them to come after me. I've got such a huge fan base. So,
Don't we all?
but yeah. So with Death of Superman,
Now,
like I said, it wasn't an organic story. Okay, going back to. Oh, go ahead. Go.
No, I was just going to say, for those who may not, with the movie coming out, obviously with that one trailer revealing Doomsday, kind of, I guess, for those who may not know, and I asked you this before we started, but obviously they're basing it in the movie Doomsday is basically Luthor's, reincarnation of Zod. What's the difference in the comics?
Well, and it's hard for me to remember, honestly, but like I had to look it up a little before. But Doomsday is basically the best way to put it is he's the Balrog from Krypton. The Balrog, of course, is that mean monster that Gandalf fights in Lord of the Rings. Like, he's basically this primal, super powerful primal monster, essentially. He doesn't feel, he barely thinks, probably. Like, he's just a rage machine. There's a little bit of history behind it that I don't totally remember. Like, he was born in a prehistoric Krypton, so he was born about 250 1,000 years before Superman was.
Wow.
Now, and you think about it, like if you want to put real science into it,
So did he?
when was Superman born? Was he born 20 years ago, or was he born longer ago? When you put in like physics, he had to travel through wormholes to get to Earth. Was he born, or maybe he wasn't born yet?
Well,
That's getting too.
Well,
too
I
much.
guess if you want to go by the movies, if you want to go by the,
I know, like,
by
there's
the,
no good science in these movies.
yeah,
But
I mean, if you want to go by the movies, they sent him off as he was basically almost a newborn, and by the time he arrives on Earth,
that's right,
he's almost like 4 or 5 years old.
yeah, that's right.
You know, somewhere around 5 or 6 maybe.
But
so
was that did time flow differently for him? Was that actually
Yeah,
hundreds of years ago? Or
see, that's
yeah.
something we'd have to ask the scientists if that was possible for.
Well, I think a scientist would tell us to grow up.
Right. but what I was trying to get at, if a scientist could tell you if a kid could survive in a capsule like that
Yeah.
from another planet and being sent all those light years to Earth,
He'd probably have to travel through wormholes.
you would
So he's
think
traveling
you would
through
think he'd
time
have
almost.
to
Yeah,
you
time and
think he'd have
space.
to hit some wormholes or something, because normal space travel, I mean, just in our own universe alone, it'd take you, what I think they say 18 months just to get to Mars.
Yeah.
So, or is it 6 months to get
And
to
as
Mars?
far as, and you know, my problem with space travel in movies is as far as scientists know, matter cannot travel at the speed of light. It'll tear it apart.
I think I've heard that where if a human could travel as, say, at the speed of light, travel, say, out to Pluto and back, by the time you would get back to Earth, even though for you it might be X amount of time, when you got back to Earth, most of your friends and family would either be really old or already dead.
Yeah.
So, even though for you it may have been technically, I mean, this may not be accurate. To you, it may have been a 2-week trip, but for them, you know, they lived out the rest of their lives. So
in real space travel would have to include portals.
Yeah.
But
I would guess.
we're not scientists,
No.
so we're just dorks. But anyway,
And if a scientist is actually listening to this, which if someone actually is a scientist listening to this, I'll pay you $10. But
dude, if anybody's listening to this
Send-
at all, I'll pay you $10. Please listen to my show.
well, what I was going to say was, you know, hey, send us a quick note about you know, if we're right or wrong. I'm
Yeah.
sure we're wrong, but
Oh,
you know, give us a quick fact. It would be interesting to hear.
So you know, we're talking a little bit about the Flash and how he always reinvents. The Flash and Supergirl were both killed in Crisis on Infinite Earth. Crisis on Infinite Earth rebooted everything, except, like, even though it rebooted everything, like, Wally West still knew that the Flash was dead because he became New Flash, but whatever, it doesn't totally make sense. But
Does anything in the
so-
comics ever make sense?
and this is about as hard of a reboot as any comic has ever gotten, and even it's not totally hard. But so it started with John Byrne's Man of Steel. It was a 6-part story that rebooted Superman's origin. It basically retold it, but modernized it.
Okay.
John Byrne, of course, started as an artist at Marvel. He did X-Men and Fantastic Four. Very good. I really like his X-Men and Fantastic Four. Like, his X-Men, of course, includes the Phoenix Saga. His Fantastic Four includes that time that Galactus was on space trial. But Fantastic Four's weird. But so that's so he wrote and did the art for Man of Steel, and it's very good. There are a few things that he did that I don't necessarily care for. Like when he revamped Lex Luthor, he made Lex Luthor, you know, more of a modern 80s villain, of course. He's a kind of the villain that we know Lex Luthor in a lot of our more modern stuff comes from John Burns. They made him more of a capitalist villain. Like he owns a lot of corporations. He's basically a skinny kingpin, essentially. Owns a lot of corporations. but like
Owns
it's
a
a
lot.
little more accessible, but like they kind of lost some of his more mad scientist qualities that he had in the 40s, 50s, and 60s.
So if Lex Luthor is basically owns a lot of corporations and is rich that way, how does he end up having a beef with Superman?
Well, in the comic, in the Man of Steel storyline,
Is it just because
Superman, Clark Kent starts, he's a reporter and he starts nosing around. And of course, he's a reporter with super hearing. So he hears things and he starts to realize that Lex Luthor is
not who he says he is?
pretty much, yeah, he makes a lot of his money selling weapons and all sorts of things. Excuse me. So that doesn't make him too happy. And then, of course, Superman is also inevitably hurting Lex's business by arresting some of his guys. So Lex Luthor seeks out to find him, and they don't like each other. That's basically the gist of it.
Okay.
And I think that's kind of where they're going to go with this movie. Maybe not.
It's possible. It's possible because, I mean, this Lex Luthor, for at least Jesse Eisenberg,
He seems more like an idealist.
but who owns a lot of corporations. Because I don't know if you ever picked up on the Man of Steel, that when Clark shows back up, and there's that semi that has LexCorp on it. So
I need to watch this movie again, by the way. But I need to watch it again before the new one comes out. But so that's kind of the gist of it. The problem was, though,
and now I'm going to assume that his beef with Superman would be because, like with maybe not exactly like Wayne's beef would be. It's because of the destruction of Metropolis, what happened.
That's kind of. I think so.
That's going to be part of it, but I think at the same time, I think Luthor is going to be more interested in also of what actually makes Superman, and so that's going to be the other part of it, where Bruce Wayne is just like, dude, you took down a building of mine, you killed my people.
Do you think we're going to see Lex? And we didn't see a whole lot of it in the 80s and 90s in the comics, but do you think we're going to see Lex Luthor's suit he almost has an Iron Man suit, essentially, the the purple and green suit that he uses, his Krypton suit that he uses to fight Superman. Not in this movie, but do you think we'll see it in a sequel?
I don't know.
That would be kind of. I would like to. That would be kind of fun.
Considering Warner Brothers is not even doesn't even have a Man of Steel 2 sequel on their schedule.
I can't believe that.
And if it is, it probably won't be till 2019 or 20.
No.
I don't know where they can go with.
Well, they need to put in Brainiac eventually. Oh, by the way, we were just talking about how Doomsday is in this movie. This is the first major villain in a Superman movie that's not Lex Luthor or Zod.
True.
And I mean, yes, I'm sure someone will write in.
Well,
but Jack Saar was in. It's like, yeah, but he doesn't count. He's not a.
Well, who was the main
no one's
villain
going to write
in Superman 3?
No one from the comics. It was. I
know.
Robert Vaughn, just playing a Lex Luthor wannabe, but he wasn't in the comics.
Because that movie also had Richard Pryor in a forgettable role.
You know what? Like, I hope that Richard Pryor as Gus Gorman, and
yes.
I've heard somebody say that, like, there's been like little tongue-in-cheek references to Gus Gorman here and there. Like, they don't come out and say who he is, but like there'll be a character that looks kind of like him in
the comics.
It's just, well, either in the comics or the show. I don't know. I've just heard this. Like on, I think there might have been a tongue-in-cheek reference to him on Smallville, even like it's there. They don't call him that, but it's like,
are they just poking fun of that appearance?
More or less, okay. Yeah. But you know what? Honestly, as dumb as that character was, I feel like they should make him a character in the comics.
Now I saw Superman 3. It came out 83.
Yeah.
Okay, and I saw it in theaters I would have been 12 years old at the time, but as a 12-year-old kid, I enjoyed the movie. Obviously, as an adult, I got a completely different opinion of the movie. But
There was also a lot less to work with
and the
back
special
then.
effects
Yeah.
looks terrible. Not Superman flying part. It's just some of the other towards the end. But I always found the more interesting part of that movie, at least from adult point of view, is the battle he has with quote his evil self.
Yeah. What's weird about it
Now-
though is
now,
like
was
when
that
it's
actually-
done, it's done.
Was
And then
that was that actually happening, or was he just imagining that in his head?
no, that well,
See,
no,
that-
I think he did split off.
Okay.
I don't remember.
Now, what
Like,
character
it's
would that
something
be?
about Red.
Was that actually something from the comics they took that from?
The closest thing
or
that
did they just create it for the movie?
they just created it for the movie. The closest thing,
'Cause
if you want to say it's
what,
from the comics,
Bizarro?
you could call it Bizarro, but it's you could call that Bizarro. Actually, they don't call him that in the movie.
Because there's some funny parts in there. Because the okay, I'll refer to it as the Bizarro Superman in Superman 3 goes and puts the Leaning Tower of Pisa back straight.
Yeah.
And just
So
the other thing,
stupid.
which I find funny because the guy selling it in Italy, Hal Crooked, sits there and takes and smashes all of his ones,
Yeah.
and then at the end of the movie, the real Superman comes back and puts it leaning back, and the guy has to destroy him all over again. So that's kind of funny.
That's actually pretty funny.
That's kind of funny. But that's the only thing memorable about that movie was that part and him fighting himself.
You know, if that would have been the focus of that movie, it would have been a decent movie. But like at the
having him split off early on and then battling himself would have been great.
that is the weirdest movie because he fights him in the junkyard and then defeats him in the junkyard and then all of a sudden and it's so weird and then all of a sudden it's like, well, got to go back and
Take care
finish
of the other
off
guy.
Robert Vaughn and his sexual scary computer.
I have no idea
like
what that was.
it's like, why don't you just take one story and focus on it?
And that really didn't have Lois Lane. It had, I think, a bit cameo.
You know why?
I used to know, but
Margot Kidder
I had an issue with.
was mad about what happened to Richard Donner.
Oh yeah, because he got kicked off the last part of Superman 2.
And actually, this is like the meanest thing. Like it is so like when you watch this movie knowing about what went on, this is so messed up. So she was contracted to be in the movie. So they're like, sure. So she comes in, she's there at the beginning and she's like, well, I'm going on vacation, leaves. And then at the end of the movie, she's like, oh, I had a great vacation. Like, and when you realize what that's about, that is so messed up. Like that is like
Now, who was in charge of Superman at that time? I
it
know
was
you
Warner Brothers.
Well, I thought there was two guys that were. I thought there was a story with two guys that were kind of owning it, that were controlling it a little bit. As far as I can't remember their names.
Oh, I can't remember.
Anyway, just Superman 3 was just a weird movie.
It's a very weird movie. It's a pretty bad movie. It does have its moments though. Like the Leaning Tower of Pizza thing is pretty funny. And I do think the junkyard scene where he fights, quote, Bizarro Superman is pretty good. You can't officially now. So if you look at him as here's what we'll like. He's sort of Bizarro Superman. So maybe in that regard, this is like the fourth time. They don't ever officially call him that, so that's why you can't really go with that. But at the same time, Bizarro Superman, every time they reboot Superman, they change his origin every time. So like at first, usually Lex Luthor creates him. I guess this other guy, this Lex Luthor wannabe, created him. Okay, yeah, I mean he's Bizarro Superman. There you go. But like it's just odd that he's only on there for like a few minutes of the movie.
It's like a 5-minute fight scene.
Yeah, and then they're done. It's weird. It's a very weird movie.
That would have been a better fight scene and ending to the movie Superman 3 than what it.
Yeah, I know. It's so crazy. It's like that should have been the final climax right there. Like,
yeah,
there you go. It's like all it is Superman fighting for his identity. Like he's not saving the world. He's fighting for his identity in a junkyard.
And you get more of a what was it, Lana Lang?
Yeah,
his sweetheart from Kansas.
Yeah.
So Of course, there was one scene where he goes and I think he's bowling with her in that movie, and because of the powder or whatever, he sneezes as he goes to release his ball, and it just shoots down the lane and blows up all the pins. I mean, there's some funny parts in that movie.
Well, and then you compare the opening credits to the opening credits of the first two, where the opening credits of the first two were like this big,
yeah,
and then this one it's like this
Superman
goofy Rube Goldberg comedy thing where everyone's slipping on.
Yeah,
it's like, what is this? God.
The only thing that movie has going for it really is it wasn't Superman 4.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the only good thing for it.
Yeah. Yeah. As I've pointed out, I think I would, if somebody were to put a gun to my head, if some sadistic weirdo and would put a gun to my head and say, I'm going to force you to watch one of these movies or you die, which one, between Superman 4 or Batman and Robin, I'd pick Batman and Robin.
Oh, yeah.
Superman, they're both unwatchable, but Superman 4 is, like, horrendous.
Yes.
Like, it's not even bad from a fan viewpoint. Well, same with Batman. I don't know. They're both bad. Just, either way, like, I guess I'd rather watch either of them than getting shot. It's just a movie. Like, whatever. But, whatever. Like, who cares? Like, oh, wow, okay, I guess I'll watch this movie. What? An hour and 30 minutes? I don't think I'll make it. Just shoot me. I don't know. That's such a dramatic expression that we have.
And I really feel sorry for the late Christopher Reeve, being that Superman 4 will be known as his last time he portrayed Superman in the costume. I mean, I know he made that appearance on Smallville.
But no one remembers it, though.
Yeah,
like,
no.
I didn't know it existed until, I honestly didn't even know it existed until I was older. My friend showed it to me, and
that movie came out, what,
I thought
1987?
3 was the last one.
1987?
Yeah, something like that.
I believe.
Just 2 years before Batman.
Yeah.
Oh. But that's a bad movie.
Oh, yeah.
Nuclear Man.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's just... I mean, I don't.
And it's got the guy from 2.5 Men as Luther's nephew.
Yeah, I forgot what you said.
Lenny Luthor.
Yes. That cracked me up the last time. Lenny Luthor.
So anyway, Superman was rebooted, but the problem was with John Stern's Man of Steel series and with all the Superman series in general in the late 80s and early 90s, is it really didn't sell that well. They're very good comics, like very good in that period, but it didn't sell well. Well, and there's a couple problems. Part of the problem is other comics like Batman was doing great. And this was a period when, the boom. This is the spectator boom of comics that started in the late 80s and went on through the 90s. And then there was the eventual spectacle bust of the comics industry. But there were just other comics out, and kids wanted, like, cooler, flashier stuff. You could do that with Batman. You could do that with X-Men. Can't really do that too much with Superman. Zack Snyder tried, but you really can't do too much with the Bat, making him flashy and edgy. So, like, in this period when everything was just so much edgier, people weren't paying attention to Superman. So they had to do something a little different, kill him off, get the media some hype about it, get people excited about,
because
what's going on here?
Theoretically, he's a character that shouldn't never die.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And, there were some other issues that I have with Superman at this time period. And actually, I think this goes on all throughout the 90s and the 2000s, but they made it a rule for a long time after Crisis on Infinite Earth that Superman had to, in this official universe, had to be the only Kryptonian. So there was no more General Zod, no more Supergirl. She was killed off, and the Crisis, and she doesn't exist in this universe. Now the Supergirl, of course, they still found a way to make Supergirl in the comics, but she was like some like clone or something. But like, you know, like all these Kryptonians that originally survived the explosion of Krypton had to be deleted. Like only Superman, he had to be the last son of Krypton, which is weird when you think about it. It's like if they had space travel, why couldn't there be some that survived? Why couldn't there be the Bottle City? You know, I mean, it doesn't really make much sense. Why does a lot of their technology survive but not them? I mean, Brainiac is technology from Krypton. Speaking of, Brainiac is like the number 2 Superman villain. I was getting to that earlier. Okay, so we've had
So what would be the top, say, 5 villains in Superman's?
It's a little harder than Batman, but I would say, you know, Lex Luthor, Brainiac. Brainiac is huge.
Does Doomsday fit in somewhere in that?
You know, it depends on who you ask. Like, I wouldn't. Like, pretty much Doomsday's big story was the death of Superman. Like, he's come back here and there. That's another thing that was big at this time period. You had, they tended to make these new villains that were bigger and badder. And they had, like, these cool storylines, but, like, they really couldn't lead themselves on. They weren't self-sustaining. Like, after the original storyline is done, you can't really do much with them. Doomsday, Spider-Man, of course, had Venom, and then Carnage was the same way. Like, he was even bigger and badder than Venom, but he could sustain himself even less afterwards. Like, they're kind of a one-and-done story character. Even Bane. Like, they've never really been able to do much with Bane after Nightfall. Like, he still appears here and there.
I think what Nolan did with Bane made him more of a not necessarily just a dumb brute like they did when Batman and Robin. Was that Batman and Robin? Yeah. Batman and Robin. Instead of making him just a big old dumb brute, they kind of made him. Yeah, he's still a big brute, but he's more of an ideological terrorist type of a brute.
Well, and
I think that
in the comics he was kind of a genius in the comics, if I remember correctly.
Yes, I think in the Nightfall he was very calculating.
Yeah.
So, but no one's ever tried to do that because I think they're afraid of he's supposed to be that big. Well, what do you do with him?
Yeah.
So most people think, oh, well, he's not that smart.
And the storylines for all these villains were so big that you can't really follow up with that. Like, it's like, so I mean, it's kind of weird. But like, if I were to name a top 10, I'm going to say Lex Luthor, Brainiac, Darkseid. Even though Darkseid. Now, whether or not you really consider Darkseid to be a Superman villain or just a DC, it would be like saying Thanos is an Avengers villain or something like that. I mean, it's
now it looks like Darkseid. They're teasing Darkseid.
Yeah.
Eventually, because it sounds like Darkseid may appear somewhere in the DC universe here.
Darkseid's pretty awesome. Like, he's actually like. I think Darkseid's way cooler than Thanos. I like Thanos a lot, but I think Darkseid's actually cooler. So there's 3. You know, I don't really want to put... Even though I like Zod for the movies, like, he's really not in the comics very much. Because, like, you know, they had to delete him from the comics for, like, all throughout the 80s and 90s.
They did that by choice or just because...
Because he was a Kryptonian. And you can only have one Kryptonian now. That is the rule. But, you know, then you have other villains like Metallo and Parasite that are pretty cool. He's got a lot of villains, but, yeah, I mean, it's mainly Lex Luthor and Brainiac are the big ones. And then you've got Darkseid, who's a...
So why do you think...
Like a DC villain.
So why do you think the movie studios are afraid to...
Bizarro would be in the top 5 also, and Mr. McZittleplex. But go on.
Yeah, I was just gonna ask you, why do you think the studios are so afraid when they do a Superman movie not to go outside of Lex Luthor or the ones that we've Zod? Why are they afraid
You
not
know,
to do
I
someone?
could not tell you. Man of Steel. It's Zod. It's interesting that they did that. But the fact is, Man of Steel. You're rebooting the movie, and that movie would have been perfect for Brainiac. Brainiac is a computer. He's a computerized android. He's sort of like Ultron from Krypton. Like, instead of a bunch of Kryptonian criminals after Superman, wouldn't this artificial intelligence that's trying to preserve the memory of his planet come after Superman? Like, that's the perfect thing. Like, it's really the perfect story, and I am dumbfounded. I don't know why they didn't do that. And to this day, Michael Shelley would have been a fine Brainiac. Like, I don't know why they went with the Zod thing on this one.
I think Zod was the easy choice.
I think it was the easy choice because everyone knows him from the movies.
Right.
He's actually like, he's not, even though he's a big Superman villain in the comics, but he's not very common.
Now, I will say the Man of Steel version of Zod, I like that a little bit better than what the first version of Zod you got with the original Superman movie with Christopher Reeve. But at the same time, that's almost kind of like comparing apples with oranges.
They were very different, very different characters.
But the guy who played Zod in the original Superman movie, I thought made an excellent.
Yeah.
Well, actually, not the original Superman movie. It had been Superman 2, but made an excellent villain.
Yeah.
I mean, he played that well.
Yeah.
I mean,
he was very much a dictator.
You're right. I mean, hell, he even made Luthor kind of cringe a little bit, so that was kind of cool.
And the Michael Shelley version was more of a madman, so to speak. Like, and so they're very different villains.
Yeah,
very different. Even though they're the same villain, they're very different. Yeah, I don't know. I still think they should have went with a Brainiac.
Now I've heard rumors that for Justice League, I've heard rumors at one time they might go with actual Brainiac, but also then there's that image that you get from the trailer real quick for Batman versus Superman of the Doomsday, not the Doomsday, but the Darkseid character.
Really? I didn't see that.
There's an image, Batman standing, and there's a Darkseid symbol or whatever it is.
Really?
So they're almost like they're.
See,
so I don't know exactly where they're leading, because obviously they're going to want a big villain for both the Justice League movies, but
I think for Justice League they're going to have to go with Darkseid.
And it looks like they're leaning towards obviously a Superman villain for the main villain, which is fine. I don't care, but it's just you constantly keep seeing Superman fight the same villains over and over again in these movies, and I wouldn't mind seeing Brainiac or to give me something different that I haven't seen before. I'm not as familiar with Superman in the comics as I am with Batman. Batman's got a lot of rich villains in it, but
Superman does not. Superman has some very good villains. He does not have the number or caliber that Batman has.
Right.
Like, I mean,
I don't think Superman has the caliber of villain of, like, say, a Joker.
No. Well, Lex Luthor would be about as
close as you get.
Yeah.
But once you get past Lex Luthor, though, it really drops off the.
It's pretty much Lex Luthor and Brainiac. Brainiac is a great villain. Zod is, like I said, Zod's a good villain, but like they barely use him in the comics. And then you've got villains like Metallo and Parasite they're fun, but they're not like essentials.
Now, I will say Man of Steel gave you probably, I think, one of the best backstories with Krypton before they sent him off the planet.
Yeah, I think so, too.
And that was interesting to see how that played out.
But, they could have done that with Brainiac. If you ever get a chance, watch the Superman animated series. The movie followed that very similarly, except Jor-El wasn't fighting Zod. He was fighting Brainiac. Brainiac, as the computer, was I don't know what he was doing, but like I don't know, it doesn't make sense. But it was pretty much the same thing. I don't know. I'm not going to complain too much, but like I really hope for Man of Steel 2 they give us Brainiac, keep Lex Luthor going. I mean he is the number one.
I would be
just
okay.
keep him as like a side villain.
I would be okay with Lex Luthor kind of more or less maybe kind of the puppet master to the villains in this version. He's there. He's Superman's always like I can't always pin stuff on him, but he knows he's got to be something doing with it. He's just doing enough to keep his nose clean to keep out of whatever. But if that makes
Oh yeah, it does.
I think you know where I'm going with that. So
well, for this Man of Steel 2 should have Brainiac, and Justice League should have Darkseid. Darkseid's big. Like he's big. He's bigger than Superman. So but so just a few recaps of Death of Superman. Doomsday and Superman kill each other in a battle, and this was in Man of Steel issue 75. That's the famous one with the bloody Superman logo. That's a weird issue because each page is one panel long, so like it's super dramatic.
wow.
And then at the end, they both die in the rubble. His parents watch on live television. Lois Lane and Jimmy Olsen are there, and so they both die in the rubble. Well, afterwards, then you have Funeral for a Friend, which is a storyline where everyone's coming together, and Lex Luthor may or may not be trying to clone Superman's body. And then after that, you have Reign of the Supermen. What's important about this is we get 4 new characters 3 months after the Superman hiatus. All 4 Superman books get their own Superman. Man of Steel gets Steel, who's the John Henry, what's his name? John Henry Irons, who was a steelworker. He's the black guy, played by Shaquille O'Neal in the movie Steel. He's actually a really good character. He's the only one. He doesn't pretend to be Superman, obviously, because he's black. But like no one's gonna fall for that. You just kind of look a little different. But what his deal is he develops a suit sort of like the Iron Man suit, and he calls himself Steel, like Man of Steel, as tribute to Superman, and he says he's going to continue living on the legacy that Superman started. And that he's a fantastic character. Just the idea of like, if this alien could do all this, we can do this too. We can keep this going. And he's a great character. So he's one of them. Then in Cyborg Superman appears in the Man of Tomorrow books. He was actually, they later revealed that he was a cyborg, not of Superman, but of an astronaut named Henry Henshaw, and Cyborg Superman later becomes a major villain. It's Bizarro Superman wasn't enough. We had to have Cyborg Superman too. But he's actually he might be close to the top 5 too. He's pretty big. Like he's very evil.
Huh. And then you see here you got Superboy.
Mm-hmm.
And then
he was a clone of Superman.
And went by Metropolis Kid. Wow.
Oh God. He was awful.
That sounds like a stupid
if you ever look up the 90s Superboy, he has that horrible like haircut, like that where it's shaved but a little hair, that what do they call it? The I forget what they call it, that horrible 90s bowl cut, bad sunglass. Like, oh man, they just try to hip that character up so much. Wow. The 4th one I don't really remember. His name is his name is the last son of Krypton, and let's see, he appeared in Action Comics. I guess he was a former villain called the Eradicator. I'm really not familiar with that one. But yeah, so you get 4 Supermen now. And then eventually they just bring Superman back. But that's pretty much the story behind that.
So how long before you got the real Superman back?
Not long. I think it was only like a year.
Huh.
Like I don't remember, actually.
So did DC sales suffer during that time?
No, they went through the roof.
Really?
Yeah. Like, because people were just...
Curious?
Yeah. People were like, this is going to be worth money someday because Superman's dead. And it's like, no, it's not. It's not going to be worth anything. But yeah, it's...
Okay, would a Death of Superman storyline work in this DC universe, possibly? Eventually?
I think for movies, I don't know. I mean,
okay,
if you do it, you're gonna have to.
Okay, let's say hypothetically, this DC universe that they're trying to kick off works for them. Everything is successful. You get a Man of Steel 2, it does well. Okay, it's whatever. They continue on. We get a Batman or 2 movie. They do a third Man of Steel movie to end the whole thing. At least with Superman, would a Death of Superman storyline work to close out a DC universe?
To kill him off, maybe, but like you have to
kind of like
actually
with Nolan,
kill him off.
Kind of like with what Nolan did
Yes.
with Batman.
That was. I don't think that's ever going to happen again in any superhero movie. By the way, that was a fantastic.
And you know my arguments with that movie. So it's not that what they did with it at the end. It's that whole. Well, did they or did they not?
Well, and it's kind of a pussy way of going about it. It's like, well, I don't know.
It's like
it's kind of neat that it leaves it up to your own imagination, but at the same time, yeah.
At the same time, it's like I didn't like the idea of them killing him off. But when you put that little notion in there, okay, did Alfred really see him? Did he not? I would have been happier, even though I wouldn't have liked it, of going, yes, he really is gone. He's dead.
Yeah.
That would have ended the whole trilogy. That would have stopped any talk of Christian Bale possibly showing up as Batman in this version.
Yeah, I think that's as close as we would ever get.
I think
to
either Christopher Nolan chickened out and not doing it, or the studios didn't want him to completely say, and they wanted to let the fans make that decision of whether or not he is or isn't, and not let the director. I don't know. I'm making that assumption.
Yeah, I don't know. That's hard to say. I really don't know.
I would like to know. I'm sure Nolan's probably talked about this before, but I just would have liked it if they hadn't necessarily put that shot in there.
One thing about the Death of Superman is the legacy also that I left behind. DC started a trend after that. Of course, there was Batman's Nightfall. The big one was where they do big events where they change the character. A big one was for Green Lantern, Emerald Twilight, which directly correlates with the death of Superman, or after Superman comes back to life. And we've already talked about Nightfall, but with Emerald Twilight, which is actually one of my favorite storylines, as well as its sequel, Emerald Dawn. Green Lantern, what's his name? Mongol, who was originally a Superman villain, but has become a Green Lantern villain. Really bad guy. He's an alien overlord and conqueror. He's kind of like a poor man's Darkseid, basically, like the same thing all over again. But Mongol teams up with Cyborg Superman, and they destroy Coast City. They destroy an entire city. Coast City is Green Lantern City, Superman Metropolis, Batman Gotham, Green Lantern Coast City. That's his town. So, like, everyone, he's known as all dead, or mostly dead, because they bombed the crap out of that city. So he goes up to Planet Oa, talks to the Masters, and asks them. Finds out that they knew that was going to happen, but they didn't do anything to stop it because the Force and this, that, and the other, whatever BS writers come up with for this sort of thing. So Green Lantern kills all of them, and then he kills a bunch of other Green Lanterns, and Hal Jordan becomes the villain Parallax.
Huh.
So then they have to bring in a new. He's sort of, which like the whole thing is very similar to Jean Grey and the Dark Phoenix saga, but they have to bring in a new Green Lantern, even though they already had two on Earth already with John Stewart and Guy Gardner, but they had to bring in a new one, Kyle Rayner, who, as painfully 90s as he is, I really like the character. Like, but he goes and he becomes the new Green Lantern. He and Hal Jordan fight. Hal Jordan eventually realizes that like murder is wrong and sacrifices himself for the greater good, and he dies. Of course, he comes back to life. They kept him dead for a while. He came back to life in like maybe 2005 or 6. So they kept him dead for almost 10 years. But yeah, so you've got that, and then you've also got Wonder Woman. She becomes the ruler of Helios or whatever that island is called. I forget. Aquaman gets his hand bit off by a bunch of piranhas, and he's got a hook now and a beard. So like all of the DC characters after Superman, they all went through all these life-changing things, and even in Marvel, like Spider-Man had the Clone Saga, which was awful, and we don't like to talk about that, but like this was kind of a trend in the 90s afterwards. And then of course you had the bust. You had the boom in the late 80s, and then you had the bust of the late 90s, and that's kind of the problem that Marvel had. That's why they had to sell. Like people got sick of reading terrible comics, and like they weren't making money anymore. So like, not all of them were terrible, but like and also you had a bunch of people. They were following the market, and all these fly-by-night fans, and fly-by-night fans of anything, and once you get tired of it, you're done with it.
Yeah.
That's not. I've been a fly-by-night fan of several things. I'm not insulting these people, but it's like when you cater to people who may or may not be diehards, you better watch out, because eventually they'll stop buying. They will stop buying your stuff eventually because they just get tired of it.
Right.
So,
I bought Batman comics for several years, and it got to the point after a while, it just got too monotonous.
Oh yeah,
it got to the point of, I just wanted Batman. Then I found myself, as we talked earlier, having to buy other comics of other characters in the DC universe to keep up with the storylines, and it just got to the point of this is ridiculous.
That started in the 80s, and it got really bad in the 90s.
I mean,
they still do it to the extent now. What they do is kind of they make sure that that you're following a certain storyline with a certain artist and a certain writer, and it has a beginning and an end. So it's a little less monotonous, but it still is, because it's like, but there's like 20 other of these.
Now, I'm assuming that all these comic book movies being so successful at the theaters has got to be helping the comic book industry itself.
A little bit, not as much as you think. The comic book industry mostly gets its money from. The movies are big, but mostly they get their money from merchandise.
Really?
Like collectibles, action figures, buttons, T-shirts. Like that's where they get theirs. Like most people really still aren't reading comic books as much as they were.
Because if I was ever to get back,
they're more so than they were 10 years ago, but not as much as they were in the early 90s.
Now I'm the kind of person, and maybe I'm just still old fashioned, but if I was to get back into buying comics, I would not go the route of the digital way, because I want that tactile feel of flipping through the pages. I don't want to sit there and use a mouse to click to get myself through. Now, granted, that'd be the easy way of keeping up with it, but
and I'm kind of like you. Actually, I'm gonna edit my statement a little bit earlier about how people aren't reading. People are probably reading more than they were, but digital comics are so much cheaper. Mm-hmm. And I'm gonna tell you, At first, I still like getting a physical paperback comic every now and then because I like to collect. I like to have something to collect, but it's expensive.
Yes.
Like it's about $5 for something that you'll read in 5 minutes. Whereas, like, you can do the digital thing and
Now, when I was buying
just do a monthly payments.
yeah,
with
when I was
Marvel.
buying the Batman comics, I mean, I was paying what? I think I wasn't paying more than $2 something for a
Rarely
comics. Yeah,
like
now,
rarely $2.
Yeah,
even.
now you're the last time or two I bought a few Star Wars comics. I mean, $3.99, $4.50. It's just like for something that's what 20 pages, if that. And
I mean,
and
it's a total ripoff.
And then plus you got all of those pages of advertisings in there, so you really only getting about 15 pages of really of the comics themselves.
So what there are two routes that most people, and the industry knows this, there are two routes that most people take. Part of the reason why they do these storylines where they bring in a writer and artist and they'll tell you this is going to be a 12-issue storyline. Part of the reason why they do it is because they know that most people, if they buy the first issue of that, they're going to say, you know what, this is pretty good, but I'll wait until it's all done and just buy the paperback
or something like that.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
The whole thing together.
Yeah, the anthology of it, and because they make anthology books for like every storyline now, so you're either going to do that or you're going to just read it online.
Have you seen some of the covers for the new Dark Knight 3 that Frank Miller's doing?
No.
Some of those have looked. There's their covers, and of course there's all the alternate covers. But some of those covers have looked pretty impressive.
He is a really good artist. I heard the Dark Knight 2 is not worth reading. Problem with, I think Frank Miller's kind of gone crazy the past years, over the past 10 or 15 years. But he's still a great artist. He's still a very, very, very good artist. So, I mean, that's the thing. It's like, I might look at Dark Knight 2 and 3 just to see his art. Not even bother with the story, but...
I'm trying to find something here. Hold on. There's the Dark Knight Returns comic, obviously set in the 80s, and Reagan's the president. And even in the animated film, and I didn't really touch on this in my podcast, and I probably should have, but they kind of made Reagan out to be kind of not the brightest bulb in the world. But there's this one part I found funny, even in the movie, and it's worded, they took it exactly from the comics. It's because the Soviet Union's launched nuclear missiles at this one island that the U.S. was trying to keep the communists from taking over. And the wording in the comics says, well, folks, I've got some good news, and I've got some bad news. The good news is the Soviets have withdrawn their forces from the island of Corto Maltese. And the bad news, well, it looks like the Soviets are pretty bad losers. Yes, they are. And it's because they launched a couple nuclear missiles at the island, and just the way they whole portray of Reagan in the movie and the comics have him as like the dumbest person in the world.
Yeah. That's pretty funny.
And what makes it even funnier is now that I've watched the movie, the voice that they kind of did for him, I hear that in my head now when I look through this, and it just cracks me up because they kind of had him as almost a goofball.
We were I want to point this out in case you missed it on my show, or on Reggie's show, which you should listen to Reggie's show, but. We were talking. You had just informed me. I still haven't seen the movie The Dark Knight Returns. One of these days, I'm going to watch it. I've read the book, of course, but you informed me that Conan O'Brien plays the voice of the
talk show
host in the infamous talk show scene in that book, or in the movie, I should say, but the infamous scene from the book. That is so funny. Like I am. Like ecstatic by that. Like that makes me want to go home and watch it right now. I'd rather I would rather read it again first before I watch it, but like because I haven't read it in about 5 years, but no longer than that. 10 years maybe. I don't know. It's been a long time. But yeah, that is so funny. Let's go over just a real quick recap over Superman and other media. First there was George Reeves.
Right.
George
Reeves.
Yeah.
Yeah, in the 50s.
Now he was actually. Did you know that there was actually a movie?
No.
With George Reeves? Yes. I think that's actually before the TV show.
Huh.
It's kind of. I've never seen it, so I can't talk about it too much. But I think it was sort of like the pilot of. Sort of like to get kids into the show,
Now
so they had it at the theaters.
The Superman show back in the 50s, there was like 170 some episodes done or something like that. Half of those episodes are in black and white.
Yeah.
The other half was actually in color.
Yeah.
Those last, it's like almost a split right down the middle of number of black and white to color. Even though they did them in those last half of those episodes in color, no one could see them at the time in color because
Yeah.
you didn't have any
true,
color
yeah.
TVs at the time.
But
they still did them in color, which I found unique.
That is very interesting.
And of course,
actually.
if you wherever you live, if you happen to have MeTV in your area, you can still catch those old Superman shows.
I
on
try to
Saturdays,
if I ever have
on
a day
Saturdays.
off. Yeah, I try to. And actually before that there was the old Fleischer cartoons that they'd show in the theaters.
Yeah, and
those are good. Have you seen those? I mean, they're like
I've been wanting to try and find the old Super Friends cartoons from the 70s. just out of morbid curiosity because it's been so long since I've seen them that I for some reason
Wonder Twins power activate.
Well, that and the whole
He always turns into she turns into like something awesome like an eagle, and he turns into a bucket of water. It's you suck.
Well, the only reason why I say because some of those I remember basically, meanwhile in the Legion of Doom,
gosh.
and that whole
Meanwhile,
I had that looking like almost Darth Vader mask helmet thing that they were in. But
did you ever see the South Park parody of that? You can't anymore unless you have the DVD because they called it the Super Best Friends, and it had Jesus, Buddha, Muhammad. That's why they won't show it anymore. And this is before that was actually like a problem drawing Muhammad. But
I've got South Park DVDs. I'll have to look that one up.
I think it's season. It's fairly early. I want to say it's season 5 or no, it's not 5.
Well,
it might be season 4.
The biggest thing on South Park that I really liked
But
was their 3-part episode they did of, and they kind of did it in comic book style.
Yes, that one was really good. The Cthulhu one.
Yes. Because in between different things, like was it
Mysterion Rises?
The beginning the beginning and end of those episodes, they kind of did a comic book type of strip.
That was a really good.
Those were good.
And that was also they finally. Not like anyone was asking for it, but they finally revealed what the deal with Kenny is. Because originally it was just a dumb joke, like he dies all the time, which is funny, but
yes.
As they got better, they quit doing it because it's just bad writing.
There for a while they killed him off and left him off for a season
for an entire year, and then they brought him back. And then when they brought him back, they only killed him off once per season, and it was usually pertaining to the
story.
Yes, and they said that they hated Kenny, and that's why they killed him off because it was a really stupid joke that everyone loved.
They started it, but everyone loved, and they just couldn't.
Yeah. And so now they reveal. Now that they become over the years, they became better writers rather than just idiots. But they reveal in this Mysterion trilogy, Kenny is his parent.
I remember I think every time he dies, his mother all of a sudden gives birth to another small Kenny.
It's because his parents, when she was pregnant, went to a Cthulhu cult, and they just went there for the free beer. Keep in mind she's pregnant, and the Cthulhu cult cursed him he's actually the son of the Cthulhu or something like that. He's not even the son of his dad or something.
Yeah.
I don't know. But, like, they more or less explain that, yes, he does die all the time, and no one remembers. So, like,
Yeah.
I did like that a lot. But, yeah, like, meanwhile...
Yeah. Yeah, I just wanted to I'd just like to revisit some of those episodes. Not that I would want to watch all of them again. It's like, I remember as a kid, I haven't seen them in so long. I'd like to see a couple just to...
Well, on MeTV on Saturdays, they show the George Reeves Superman, Adam West Batman,
Hulk.
The Incredible Hulk, which is a really good show.
And then Wonder Woman.
Wonder Woman, which is not a very good show. like she's hot. I get why kids in the 70s liked it.
If you're gonna watch Wonder Woman, leave it on. Just mute it.
It's really stupid. Really, and it's not even. What's her name?
You would ask.
Linda.
You would ask.
Linda Hamilton.
No,
she was a singer.
No, you would ask God. Any other day, I'd be able to think of that right off the top of my head.
Don't worry, I'll edit this out. Sometimes I say I'll edit this out, and then I don't, because I think it's funnier that way. But it just depends.
Meanwhile, James' phone.
Meanwhile, let's see. What is her name? Linda Carter. There we go. Yeah, Linda Hamilton's a singer, James. Yeah, Linda Carter. Yeah, great costume. And she's not a bad actor, but it's just not a very good show.
Well, she looks better in the costume.
Well,
than anything.
And it's confusing. It's like sometimes she's fighting Nazis in the 40s, and sometimes she's not. I mean, maybe it goes in the order. I don't know.
I think there was a reason. I think the show was initially set in World War II.
Yeah.
And then something happened, and they kind of retooled the show, and they set it more in modern times. I think
that sounds about right, because I'm just like confused whenever it's on. I'm like, so now it's in the 70s. What's going on here? But I don't know. I'm making fun of that show. Like, that. It's not the worst show. I've seen worse. But yeah, it's got those four, and then after that, it's got Star Trek and Lost in Space, which I'm not the biggest fan of Lost in Space, but I can watch it occasionally. It's Reeves, of course, was Christopher Reeve.
Right. Just real quick, the Wonder Woman show in the 70s ran for 3 seasons. Okay. It ran on season 1 on ABC, and then CBS picked it up for seasons 2 and 3.
Well, that makes sense.
That may be where
they didn't want it to be. So they got cheap and made it modern day instead of. Okay, that actually makes a lot of sense. Because actually, no, the Nazi ones were kind of good. Like, I kind of like them.
Yeah.
They live on Paradise Island. Paradise Island is just an island full of sexy ladies that kick a lot of ass. Like, all right, there you go.
Huh. But
yeah. The Nazis are trying to find Paradise Island. I don't know. That was actually kind of good.
Yeah, it says here, ABC did not renew the series, so the president of Warner Brothers Television went to CBS with the notion of shifting the series to the present-day 1970s, which would cost less to produce and allow for more creative storylines. So there you go. But it only ran for 3 seasons. It took them 4 years to do 3 seasons, but there you go. I might
have to watch at least the first couple seasons of that.
Well, of course, the Wonder Woman movie they're currently filming. They're kind of doing like the Marvel did with Captain America.
Really?
Except this one, Wonder Woman, is set back in at least a good portion of the Wonder Woman is going to be set back in World War One.
World War One?
World War One.
I guess they're doing that so they don't compete with Captain America. Because, like, Wonder Woman would make way more sense in World War II.
But anyway, because she supposedly lives for so long or whatever that she doesn't really age, that they're setting it in World War One. At some point, from my understanding, they're supposed to show you how or whatever. I think World War One with flashbacks up to or vice versa to the present. So I don't know how exactly, but
I think if they're doing World War One, it's only because they don't want to compete with Captain America
or confuse people, maybe.
Yeah, because Wonder Woman, of course, fought Nazis in the comics because that was when they were being written. And I could see Nazis. I do like the idea. Excuse me. It's pretty nice. I do like the idea of Nazis Sort of like what they did on Captain America, looking for Norse gods
Uh-huh.
stuff. They're looking for the Greek gods on this island. Sort of like how they were looking for like the Holy Grail and Indiana Jones and the what else
Last
were they
Crusade.
looking for? Yeah.
Yeah.
What was
Raiders,
the other
Raiders of the
what's
Lost
the
Ark
thing?
was the Lost Ark.
Oh, Ark of the Covenant.
Covenant,
That's
yeah.
what it's called.
And then and the third one is the Holy
You
Grail.
know, like a lot of this stuff, I wonder. I don't like stuff like Ark of the Covenant and the Holy Grail and stuff like. I think you might have heard more about that if you were Catholic.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think that might have been more like I don't know because I remember never hearing about that stuff until I was a kid and finally watched Indiana Jones.
Well,
Like,
you know, Indiana Jones is way off subject
Yeah.
here, but you're watching the Indiana Jones movie, and even though in two of those movies he's going after religious artifacts,
Mm-hmm.
you really don't think about it
yeah,
because they do it in such a way.
yeah,
They're not throwing it in your face.
Yeah.
But it's just, it works.
yeah, it does.
But
They're
without
the perfect movies.
but without necessarily offending anybody on depending on what you believe either.
They really are the kind of the perfect movies. I think they really are the kind of the best movies ever made. Well, so yeah, Christopher Reeves we talked about.
Yeah, Christopher.
Then we talked about who's
well,
Brandon Routh.
Brandon Routh, which I don't
Ralph.
know. I don't know if he. I
He
don't know.
counts.
He counts, but I didn't. That movie's okay. I think for what he was being asked to do and portray, I think he did an okay job. Because he's
I
trying.
actually like Superman Returns.
Because he's trying to, as you said, I think in an earlier podcast we did at one time, he's trying to be asked to kind of pick up where Christopher Reeve left off.
Yeah, and they only picked him. Bryan Singer just picked him because he was hot. He didn't pick him because.
I mean, he's been trying to ask to fill somebody's shoes that he never should have had to try to fill.
Yeah.
He should have been able to try and make it his own, and I don't think he really got that chance.
Yeah. That's an interesting movie. It's like a good. It's an interesting. On the one hand, I think it's. On the one hand, I kind of hate the movie because it's like, so he's been gone traveling through space for 5 years. Wouldn't that have been the cooler movie to watch? But then on the other hand, I like the movie because it's like, yeah, but that's what makes this movie's not about like the amazing things he saw. It's about his homecoming and about how he doesn't fit in very well. So I have kind of mixed feelings about it. Overall, though, I really do like Superman Returns. I like it a lot better than I like Superman 3 and 4. I don't like Superman 3 and 4 at all. Well, we were talking about Superman 3. There are parts in Superman 3 that are good, but 4 is terrible. Have you ever seen, going back to Superman 2, have you ever seen the Richard Donner cut?
Yes.
It's weird, isn't it?
Yes.
It's-
Actors that knowing how the first two are, and it's two guys I was trying to think of were actually the producers of those first two movies, and they had some sort of disagreement with Richard Donner. That's why he got kicked off. He never got to finish because they actually filmed Superman and Superman 2 together.
Yeah.
And it was during the break of Superman was coming out to theaters and doing all that press. Superman 2, 80% of it was already filmed and done.
So they had to
So
reshoot.
the other guy came in and finished up the rest of the movie and whatever reshoots they need to do, and they put his name up as the director.
And actually going back a little bit with Margot Kidder, that's
And I think
a big reason why she hated them because they had to. Well, and even Gene Hackman, that's why he didn't come back for 3, and he wasn't under contract. But that's why or maybe he broke his contract. I don't remember, but he just flat out didn't come back for 3 because. And I mean, it's like, can you imagine like having to redo everything you did just for legality reasons?
Yeah.
Not because like you guys made a good movie, but because they fired the director and they don't want to put his name on the directors. It still ends up being a very good movie.
Right.
Either way, like both cuts are very good. I like I'd have to say I like the Richard Lester cut better just because that is like a more finished and polished movie. And also, like, the Richard Donner cut, since they were both filmed at the same time, they put the ending of Superman 1 at the end of Superman 2. So that kind of bothers me. Like, where he flies around the Earth.
Oh.
But, yeah, I don't know. Like, I mean, those are both very, very, very good movies. Then we got Man of Steel. What's his name? Cavill. Henry
Cavill, yeah.
Very good. I really like
Henry Cavill,
him.
Henry Cavill. I don't know how you're supposed to exactly pronounce it, but
I really like him. Really like him. He's very good.
Yeah.
I really like him. I really like Rachel Adams as Lois Lane, actually.
Yeah.
I'm
curious to kind of see what kind of chemistry they're going to have with Batman and Superman and this, and where they take it for the Justice League movies.
Yeah.
You know, or is it going to be a mutual respect for each other, or are they going to still have that kind of like Marvel's done with Cap and Iron Man, where, you know, they'll work with each other, but they still don't quite, you know what I'm saying?
I kind of feel like with Batman versus Superman, they're going to end up being like best buds at the end, because that's the way the comics always were.
Uh-huh.
Like, they'd fight, and then they're like, oh, Lex Luthor was the bad guy all along. Huh. And then, like, whereas with Civil War, like I don't know. I think honestly, like, the Avengers and Avengers 2 have both been leading up to a very big distrust between Cap and Iron Man.
Mm-hmm. And we mentioned before, and this is way off subject, but we would like seeing that distrust at the end of Ultron.
A little heavier, yeah.
Yeah.
Like, it was there, but
instead it's like, shake hands, see you later.
I almost kind of wish at the end of Ultron they would have just split right then and there.
Yeah,
But you know what? If it works out better for this movie to have them just end on like a distrustful handshake and just kind of separate on politely. If that works better for this movie, then I'm fine with it. So I'm gonna wait with my judgment.
Well, with Civil War, what I'd like to see happen is Civil War at the end of it, they both aren't talking to each other and they both don't like each other. But by the time you get to end
Infinity Wars,
Part 2 of Infinity Wars, whatever has happened, everyone's come back together again, and they don't necessarily have to be buddy, but they at least have seen each other's point of view and have at least come to understand, and they're at least respectful again to each other.
Yeah.
That would be something I would like to see and look forward to see if they do that. So, because I think with Civil War, the way you're setting it up, if they're still, quote, like they were at the end of Ultron, something's going on.
Yeah, at that point, you're just bad writing. I don't think that's going to happen.
I don't think
this movie's...
I think with Russo brothers, you're going to have that division of...
Yeah.
So...
And it, you know, it looks like Rhodey might not make it.
I'm
you know what? I really like that character. And it's sad to say it, but it's like somebody has to die. Like Phil Coulson died. It was a true death, but then they brought him back to life for the TV show. Mm-hmm. Now, Marvel Studios has like a weird relationship with the TV, with the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. show. Like, they almost act like they don't exist.
Well, because the guy Disney let Kevin Feige have complete control over the movies.
Yeah.
The guy who's in charge of the TV side technically was in charge of both.
Oh.
But Feige was having issues because the guy I can't remember the guy's name, was butting into Feige and the movies and saying whatever, and it caused a few unhappiness between Feige and him over certain things because he was constantly butting in. And so there was mention of one or two of the Marvel movies that didn't come out the way Feige would have liked it because of his stepping into something that he just should have left alone.
Yeah.
So, what was it? So, at some point last
year...
Probably
Iron Man 2 was one of them.
Some point I think it was last year or very late 2014, I think it was in 2015, Disney went ahead and said, okay, Feige, you have complete control of the movies. This guy retains complete control of, like, the Netflix series that's going on the TV. The stuff that's going on Netflix, and then the and then the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., the stuff on the TV side. That's why in first season of Daredevil, you heard, the guy with the shield, the green guy, the guy in the iron suit. He's never mentioned him by name because he's got this discourse of he's not happy. Therefore, he's not going to acknowledge what's...
See, I thought they didn't mention my name because...
technically... Like Daredevil is taking place in the same universe as the MCU, but because this guy has such a discourse with what's going on, and him and Feige don't get along, this guy is just basically, it's his way of not acknowledging it in a certain sense by just.
See, I thought I mistook that. I thought that they didn't mention Iron Man or Thor by name because that guy just didn't want to just admit that those guys really exist, even though technically they do survive in the same universe. That's really funny because I thought the reason why they did it was so they wouldn't distract people. Like if you just wanted to watch Daredevil as a Daredevil,
that could be part of it. But at the same time, this guy who's in charge of all the television side of the Marvel universe is not happy with Feige and vice versa.
Well, one of these days I might watch Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. I've just always felt like avoiding it because I just don't really want to see...
And ABC recently just renewed S.H.I.E.L.D. for season 4.
I hear Sharon Carter is very good.
Agent Carter?
Yeah, I hear that's a very good show.
And as we mentioned, I think last time, she just recently got a deal for her own TV show.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
But there's also rumors that season 3 still might happen, though, with Agent Carter, too. So
they ought to just move that to Netflix, honestly.
I think it would be better, but who knows? I mean, I don't know what kind of ratings ABC's getting with it. I would assume it's decent enough to bring it back for a second season, obviously. No. So... And I guess Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. has found their niche. So.
I guess so, which I can't believe. Like, I thought that show was terrible when I first started.
Well, see, and it got low ratings its first season, and I'm pretty sure that the reason why it got brought back for a second season, it wasn't because ABC necessarily wanted to bring it back.
Yeah.
And I could be completely wrong, but I'm pretty sure Disney said, no, you will bring the show back.
Yeah,
you will give it a chance to continue on because we haven't. That's my guess. Is the reason why.
I'm sure, came back. And that's a good thing. I mean, not everything has an immediate takes off immediately.
And if that is the case, then I applaud Disney for saying, no, you will bring it back. Yeah. You will give it a chance to still find its audience and grow in fan base and let people come to it. Because that's the problem. Really should have done. That's the problem with TV nowadays. Yeah. These networks are too quick. Oh, 2 episodes. Oh, low ratings. Bye. You're gone.
What they really should have done, though, with Phil Coulson, though, was make the show a prequel show. Like, just make it about, like, make S.H.I.E.L.D. more like FBI. Just I don't know. Have him do stuff before he died.
I don't know. But, I don't know. Was there a way you could have done the show and not have Coulson in it?
The only reason why they did that show was for the fan base behind Coulson. Yeah. And really.
As long as they keep Coulson out of the movies... And just in the thing, and they don't try and bring anything of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. into the movies. I think
I really don't care.
I think you're fine. Yeah. I think they're fine. So,
well, I think that just about wraps things up on the Man of Steel versus
with a little bit of
the Dark Knight,
with a little bit of a sidetrack of Marvel.
Oh yeah, well, Marvel's king, man. Like they really are these days.
And this would really be the first year we can actually compare DC to Marvel, because you're gonna get the Batman versus Superman and Suicide Squad. You're getting
I guess so.
You're getting Captain America, Civil War, and you're getting Doctor Strange.
Yeah, so because the only part of this DC universe that they've had so far is Man of Steel
several years back. So this is gonna be the first time you're actually gonna have mano a mano in semi-equal terms.
Yeah. Well,
to a certain extent,
Iron Man and Dark Knight But I see what you're saying.
Yeah, but as far as them with both their cinematic universes, so we'll find out who makes more and which, because that's going to end up being a bragging right. Someone's going to bring up.
They better try to make another damn Green Lantern movie.
Supposedly Green Lantern Corps or whatever is supposedly coming, but it won't be till 2019, 2020. Jeez. And supposedly, rumors is someone of Green Lantern could show up in the Justice League movie still, but that hasn't been confirmed either.
Yeah. Well, that movie was at the height of its popularity on the comics when that movie came out, because the comics had become very popular at that period. And when that movie came out, I think it kind of killed it. like the momentum is just gone now. It's like, who cares? I don't care about that blue elephant. Like, whatever.
Uh-huh.
Like, oh, there's a guy with a shark head. Who cares?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, anyway, I think that pretty much wraps it up. As I stated before, this is the Superman side of our Batman versus Superman crossover. Reggie, of course, does the Batman crossover.
It kind of our pseudo preview to Dawn of Justice in a certain weird way.
Yeah, I think I like it. It was a good idea. It was a very good idea. So, I'll have a link to mine. He'll have a link, or I'll have a link to his. He'll have a link to mine. So, check them both out.